Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Today I want to cover Learning Unit 2, Theme 4, which is on gender and identity. So we're going to be looking at how gender is an element of identity construction and looking at how that comes about. So firstly, before we go into how gender is an element of identity construction, we need to look at the difference between sex and gender. So when we're talking about sex, we are talking about the biological makeup that you are born with, or rather the biological features that you're born with. And then when we are talking about gender, we are talking about something that is different, of which we will get into how we see it as different in sociology. So when we are looking at gender, when we are looking at the around gender, we are looking at gender in the context of society, in the context of culture, and also in the context of ideological beliefs. So, as sociologists, we do not accept the biological determinism of gender. We are looking at how gender is informed by the different contexts because we exist in different contexts as well. So, in that, we need to understand those different contexts so that we can understand how gender comes about and also gender identity comes about as well. And one of the reasons we do reject biological understandings of gender is because if biology was the only determinant of gender, then we wouldn't have those who identify differently. We wouldn't have transsexuals, we wouldn't have transgender individuals. So all of these different groups of people that identify differently do defy the biological understanding of gender, and that is the point to which, as sociologists, we come at looking at gender from a holistic point of view rather than from a biological point of view only. So when we are talking about gender as sociologists, we are talking about the different roles that are associated with the different sexes. So either being male and female, and what roles are being attached to whichever sex that you're born with, but also we're looking at the different gender identities that exist. We are looking at sexuality as well. So we're looking at gender from a holistic point of view. Hence, we're saying that gender is not necessarily just biology driven, but also there's a society, there's a culture, there's ideological beliefs that inform the gender of a person and also the gender identity of an individual. And that is what we will be looking at as well. And also, when I say that there are different roles associated with being a male or being a female, there's also gender expectations as well. So with gender expectations, we as young children, we know that if you're a girl, you are given dolls to play with. If you're a boy, you're given trucks and cars to play with. All of these things is part of the societal construct of gender. They are socializing you to behave in certain ways. And that's why we find that as young girls, you find that we're playing house and we immediately assume the role of being either the mother, the sister, or whatever the case, but anything that is associated with being a female, because that's part of socialization as well. That's part of how we are socialized and how we are raised to understand the different genders that we are supposed to conform to. But then again, we find people who don't conform to those, and all of these things feed our knowledge and information of us as sociologists and our understanding as sociologists as well. So, when we're talking about gender, there are different elements of gender construction, and these are: gender is personal and social, gender is plural, gender is relational, gender is dynamic, gender is an active project, as well as gender and power relations. All of these feed your identity, or rather your gender identity, because when you're talking about gender is personal and social, we are looking at the different identities that we are given and how we either accept those identities, how we either adjust those identities, or how we either just reject those identities or completely, because they do not relate to how we feel, or rather how we identify. So that is part of gender being personal and social. So you have the choice to either accept, adjust, or reject whatever identity that the society gives to you. Gender is also plural, in the sense that the same person can present different aspects of gender identity. So they can be both masculine and they can also be feminine. So just depending on mostly the situation, and also just depending on the individual and how they identify. And then we also have gender is relational. We construct our identities in relation to other men and women. Gender is also dynamic in the sense that it alters through time and space. Our understanding of gender is not the same as it was maybe 10, 15 years ago. So that goes to show that gender does indeed alter through time and space. And gender is also an active project in the sense that we are all actively playing the gender game. We are all driving this understanding of gender through the way that we relate to young boys or young girls, what roles we associate to young boys and young girls, and so on. That goes to show that we are actively playing this gender game. Gender and power relations as well is one of the elements of gender construction, or the gender identity construction rather. And in this it says that feminism is informed by a general unequal power distribution observed between men and women. So when you're looking at the studies on gender, you cannot shy away from feminism, because in talking about gender, we are also talking about the unequal distribution of power between men and women. So all of these brought about the different feminist groups as well. So we need to acknowledge feminism as one of the key players or role players of gender studies and the understanding of gender as well. So in talking about feminism, the definition of feminism is simply men and women should have equal rights. That is how what feminism is, and that was the main point of feminism, understanding that there is inequality between men and women, and striving and promoting the equality between men and women. So I always ask people, are you a feminist? And some will say absolutely not, and that's because they might understand different forms of feminism, but that does not mean they are not a feminist, because there is a belief, no matter where you stay, there is always a belief of what should happen in society, whether men and women should have equal rights. And when we talk about equal rights, what exactly are we talking about? Should men also cook, clean, bath their children, and all of these things? And the answer would be yes, but also at the same time, can men have children, or bear children rather? Not really. They cannot fall pregnant. So there's always this debate, ongoing debate, on what do we mean by equal rights, and the different types of feminism or feminist groups will answer the questions of the manner in which equality should be achieved in society between men and women. So the development of feminist groups or feminist movements came in three waves. The first wave was at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th. And then we have the second wave of feminism, which came in the 1960s to the 1990s. And then the third wave is the one that we see today, which started in the 1996 to today. So the different forms of feminism groups, we have the radical feminist, Marxist, liberal, Black, African, ecofeminist, conservative, new intersectionality, as well as South African feminism. So there are 10 different forms of feminist groups, and you will definitely find one that you relate to the most. So all of these types of feminist groups, as I said, they all talk about or answer the question of how should equality be achieved, and also what is equality exactly. So with radical feminists, they will say that instead of patriarchy, we should have matriarchy. So, and only lesbians are the only true feminists because they do not rely on a man, which is the most extreme form of feminism, and that's possibly the one that a lot of people disagree with. Hence, they don't want to associate themselves with feminism. And then we have the Marxist feminism who look at things differently, the liberal, of course, differently. So, all of these forms of feminism argue things differently, and it's quite interesting for you to read through them and see which one you would say you relate to the most. But similarly, as we are talking about feminism, we also have to bring about masculinity studies in gender studies, because it's important. It's equally as important to talk about feminism, masculinity studies in gender studies, because we are trying to look at gender studies from a holistic point of view. So all the different contributing factors need to be touched on and need to be acknowledged equally, so that we can be able to understand all the factors that are involved in gender studies, right? So with masculinity studies, we need to also put or acknowledge rather the patriarchy that exists in society. And the patriarchy could exist as a result of culture, could exist as a result of tradition, religion, whatever the case. All of these things are very important for us to understand, so that we can pinpoint what exactly is bringing about patriarchy in our society. So when we're talking about patriarchy, it is understood to be the power that men have over women, right? There's what we call private patriarchy, which exists in the home. There's also public patriarchy, which exists in legislation and different institutions. So we find patriarchy in the workplace, where men are paid more than women. We find private patriarchy, where there's men who exercise their power in the home, so much so that there exists gender-based violence. And we have seen that gender-based violence cases are increasing on a daily basis because of this private patriarchy, and also because of the different feminist groups that are vouching for the equality between men and women. So the society, or the balances of society, or rather the society in itself, it's balancing out so much so that maybe men may be feeling um, a little more lower, if I can put it that way, than women. So all of these things are things that are of interest to us as sociologists, and that is the end of gender studies from me. I hope you found this helpful. The next time we're going to have a recording, it will be based on learning unit 3 rather, on families and households. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, guys.